All right, you guys, this week we are talking about step 4. We want to thank Jennifer Williamson for joining us. Jennifer, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Right now I am a consultant with Strategies 360, which is a public affairs firm. I do lobbying, which means I talk to legislators and decision makers about policies and why I think they should do certain things. What's important when they make decisions at the state level, the city level, the local government level. And before that, I was a legislator, with people coming to me like you, Julianne, and telling me why things were important and why I should vote a certain way. So now I'm that person.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. So today we're talking about our step 4, which is to rethink jail and bail. So obviously over at Safety and Justice Oregon, we are very committed to lowering the number of folks that we see incarcerated due to low-level crimes, mental health, substance use, crisis, and quite frankly, just unaffordable cash bail. And so my first question for you, we'll just jump right in here, is why do we have bail?
It's a great question. You know, it's a really old system. Back when we wanted to make sure that people came to court, we wanted to make sure that we had something that would bring them back. It's really tied to feudal days when land was really all anybody had, and we would tie the legal proceedings to someone's property. Fast forward, that's not really what we do anymore. We keep poor people in jail and we let people with money out, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And part of the problem in Oregon is that we guarantee the right to bail as a right in the Constitution. And that was a good thing at the time our Constitution was written, because we wanted to ensure that people had the ability to get out, to be able to use their property to get out of jail. And instead, it's really backfired. It's kept our ability to change the system to allow people to get out of jail, and has done the exact opposite. For the average person, it's kept people in jail. And that's not what it was meant to do. It was meant to do the opposite. And so it's really tied our hands with the ability to reform the whole system, because it's in the Constitution.
So and we're kind of in the same vein already, but one of, I think kind of a hero of our generation, Brian Stevenson, he says that the criminal justice system treats people who are rich and guilty better than people who are poor and innocent. Weigh in on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think part of the issue is you can really use money to access your rights, whether it is right now what we're seeing in Oregon, a crisis around public defenders. If you have money, you can get yourself a lawyer. If you don't, you can't. In Oregon right now, we don't have access to public defenders, and you can access the bail system. And if you don't have money to pay your bail, you're sitting in jail. And so our system is set up for those who have wealth, and it doesn't matter if you have a right, because if you don't have the dollars to access it, it's like you don't have it.
So how do jail and bail, how do they help protect the safety of crime victims? And where do you think they're failing to do this?
Well, I think bail doesn't care what kind of risk you are to the community. So if you're a really unsafe or risky person, the community, I would say, would rather have you in jail waiting for your trial or waiting for a resolution in your case while the system figures out what to do with you. That's the way you could keep a community safe. You don't have a risky person or somebody who is a threat to the community or would harm someone in the community be able to pay their way out of jail and go out and potentially be a risk to the community because they have access to those resources. Or the flip side, if I'm not a risk to the community, but I'm going to sit in jail because I can't pay my bail. That makes no sense. You're taking up resources that could be used for something else, like keeping that guy in who's an actual risk to the community but happens to have money. I mean, it's a perverse system because it takes into account wealth, not community safety. And so much of our system is built on wealth, not community safety or risk. And that's a real problem because it uses our communal resources, our community resources in exactly the wrong way. If what our goal is, what the drive is to keep us safe as a community. And we don't have a real way to judge real community safety.
Yeah.
And the public has no way of having a sense of, is this person safe to be in the community? We just know that this person is wealthy enough to be in the community.
Right.
And that doesn't matter. There are plenty of wealthy, scary people out there.
Yes. Yeah. And so like we're talking about, bail maybe protecting people from not showing up or, these other things. And then we talk about how, jail is supposed to be this place where people go and they get rehabilitated. But what folks in the criminal justice community know is that that's often not the case. Often people recidivize because they've learned extra skills in jail, or they've been released without any access to community services or housing or anything like that. And so how is jail unsafe for people who might be experiencing mental health issues or substance abuse disorders?
Well, there's nothing about jail that makes people healthier. It warehouses people. And in most systems, it houses people together and with no services, because that's not what jail is for. People often mistake jail and prison or use them interchangeably. So if you watch TV and people say that person's in jail, when they actually mean that person's in prison or vice versa. I mean, jail is the holding place at the county. Prison is when somebody is in a state facility after trial or after they've had a plea agreement. And so often people are thinking about services that one might receive in prison. So whether it's healthcare or an educational program or a vocational program, those are things that happen in prison. When you are in jail, you are in a cell and you are waiting trial or you are waiting a plea agreement, and there is minimal healthcare and there is no education and you are just waiting. And so it is not a place where you are receiving adequate healthcare or mental health care. You are often in a communal setting where there are people with lots of mental health needs that are often going completely untreated. And so it is not making you any better.
Right.
It is often making you much, much worse. And so it is not a safe environment for anyone. And people can be there for a very long time, especially if what they can't do is access resources for bail, where they could be in the community receiving mental health, particularly mental health and substance use disorder treatment. And that is really at a crisis level. And if somebody can bail out because they have resources and access healthcare, and another person can't because they don't have access to resources, that in and of itself is really should be shocking to people. Because if you do have a right to bail, and it's in the Constitution, and it's really meant to be a right to access your ability to get out of jail. And that's the true meaning of what it is in the Constitution. And you can't because it's wealth-based.
Yeah.
Whole idea is the ability to get out and be and access those services. Then we are not taking care of people in this community.
And sometimes I think, like we see folks that have the means to bail out or get an attorney that actually, knows how to
Right.
represent them. And they'll say, okay, well, during this time while you're out, before we go to court, finish a 90-day treatment program. And then
Right.
next thing you know, that person's sentence is shorter or they're, you know what I mean? And without giving those, those abilities to other folks, I can definitely see how that doesn't work. So what evidence do we have that the needs of bail and jail, so kind of what we were talking about earlier, where we're ensuring that a defendant will show up for a court proceeding, those types of things, what evidence do we have that this, that could be met in some other way that doesn't cause harm?
Well, I think there are plenty of examples, if you look across the country at bail or jail reform, that have been really successful. And I think when you focus on the needs of the community for community safety, and you look at needs assessments and risk assessments, and you are careful to look at risk and needs assessments in a way that is not that is truly based on that are culturally specific, right? I mean, because I think sometimes we end up in a place where we're looking at needs and risk assessments for individuals that are not culturally specific, and they end up creating a cycle in which Black and brown people end up put back in the system, right? Because they are racist instruments of needs and risk assessments that continue to put Black and brown people into the system. But if you're looking at whether or not somebody is a risk to the community, and that is the way in which you're looking at the use of jail or bail, really it should be jail, right? Bail should be off the table. Money does not make you more or less of a risk. So bail should not be part of this.
Right.
So take that away entirely. And whether or not you keep somebody in a jail cell because they are a risk to the community, there are ways to do that. And a judge should be the one figuring that out with a set of resources to figure out if a person is risk. And with a set of instruments, whether it's, psychological evaluations or the like, that are not racist instruments.
Yeah.
And there are ways to do that. And there are examples across the country of ways to do that. But it takes being thoughtful and continuing to improve the way we do that, and being really critical of the way in which we do that as a community. And I think that's hard. It's hard to say, we've been doing it this way. We reformed it. We're going to need to reform it again. And it's a constant work in progress. And I think we get, that's scary for policymakers to say, we need to continue to change this. We need to continue to update it, because it's hard to say we were wrong, or, we just voted on this and now we're going to change it again. And not to react when something bad happens, because sometimes you get it wrong, or sometimes a person changes. And if you don't keep somebody in jail and they go and do something and they harm someone in the community reacts. And the ability to say, sometimes that happens, is really hard.
Yeah.
And we're, right now we're having, there's a lot of folks who are living in a lot of fear, and there's a lot of fear mongering going on.
Yes.
And they're saying, there's a lot of folks who are saying, look, it was all that criminal justice reform that's causing what we're seeing, a spike in crime, and voters are really uncertain. And instead of saying, you know what, we're coming out of a worldwide pandemic. We have inflation, we have all of these things going on. And so things are just uncertain.
Right.
And so let's talk about that, as opposed to fear mongering.
Yeah.
That's a problem, and it's hard.
Yeah, and I think that it's good that you bring that up because, so often right now we're hearing this like tough on crime, tough on crime, tough on crime, like approach being thrown at us. And, my thinking is like we've had tough on crime for how long and it's still not working. And if crime is still rising under that model, like maybe it's just time for us to kind of take a peek at a new model. And what we know and like what's data-based, evidence-based practices says that if we give people what they need, crime goes down. If
Right.
we look at even like, weird solutions like blue light technology in certain areas, we start looking at things that are innovative and different. Obviously that takes a little bit of time for things to catch on. But, like I've heard so much of that, like tough on crime, tough on crime. But really, what we know is that jail doesn't actually work. And that kind of goes into my next question. Can you describe how even a short stay in jail disrupt someone's life?
Sure. I mean, it's not hard to think through what
Yeah.
happens when you've been removed from your life. I mean, it's just what we were talking about. If you look at what's happened over the last 2 years of the pandemic, we have all felt what it's like to have a huge disruption in your life. So imagine on a small scale what happens when somebody goes to jail. Even if you've never had the experience, I've never had the experience, thank God, but I can only imagine based on what's happened in the last few years, what it's like to be picked up out of your life. Something happens, right? Some horrible thing happens, you get arrested and you get picked up out of your life and you get put in a cell somewhere. Your entire life is changed for a day or a week or a month or a year. Everything has changed. And so we've all come off, or, we're coming out of a pandemic where everything changed for people. We were all on lockdown for a while. So think about that as just, how hard that was for all of us. And we were locked down in our own homes. So imagine being locked down in a small room without, being at home was hard enough. So that experience of not being able to go to work, having a different kinds of food, different schedule, different, sleeping in a different bed, having other people around you, wearing different clothes, being scared to death, all of those things, we experienced a teeny tiny taste of it being on lockdown during the pandemic. And a lot of us had a really, really hard time with it. Imagine that 100-fold.
And my friend Patrick, who's done work with Safety and Justice Oregon and is on the Transform Coalition, said something that was really striking to me when he was talking about getting like probation or parole violations. So data shows that if someone is in jail for more than 3 weeks, they're essentially starting their entire life over. They're essentially starting their whole process over because 3 weeks is enough time to lose your job, your housing, your vehicle, like whatever the case may be, so that reintegrating back into the community. So we know family is important. We know having supports, having finances are important. And so we know that even just 3 weeks in jail can completely alter where you're at in life.
Think of how much of your life is on a monthly cycle, right?
Yes.
Your bills are on a month, your car payments on a month, your rent or mortgage is on a month, and how much of your life is disrupted if you don't hit that monthly bill or that monthly whatever. And so if you are taken out of your life for 3 weeks or a month, how much of your life would be disrupted?
Yeah.
And so it makes perfect sense that you start over because things get reset in a month and not usually a good way.
Yes. So when we're looking at everybody's like, everybody's scared, everybody wants to talk about public safety. What are some ways that we can actually keep our community safe from people who are threatening public safety, who do maybe need to be removed from the larger group, just to either keep themselves safe or to keep others safe? But what are some other things we can do?
Well, I think there is a role for taking people out of the community, right? I mean, I think nobody is saying that is not one avenue for public safety, for community safety. Jails and prisons are not necessarily the only place where people can go to keep our communities safe or themselves safe. So, we don't have, as the pandemic taught us, a functioning public health system. And I went to visit Norway with a whole group of folks to look at their prison system, and it is much, much smaller than ours. And one of the reasons it is they have a universal health system, and they have a much more robust education system. So they have universal literacy. Everybody reads and writes there. There's no issue with that. And everybody has healthcare, and everyone has mental health care. And so having access to full healthcare just manages a whole bunch of issues that we see eventually in the criminal justice system. And that's one way they keep their community safe, is they manage healthcare in a different way. And so we don't see that the mental health issues in that sort of public safety system that we see in ours. And so a lot of people are kept safe themselves, and their communities are kept safer because healthcare is managed differently. There are folks who are inherently unsafe and are unsafe for our communities, and they may need to be removed from our communities. And that needs to be done, and it needs to be done in a humane way. And that's a conversation for the community to have. And you can't have that. You can't have that conversation as a policymaker when you have all of these other, you're managing all of these other issues in the criminal justice system. Because if you're also managing healthcare, and you're also managing mental health, and you're also managing a breakdown in the education system and in family support systems, and it's all in the public safety system, then the conversation you're having as a policymaker is about a bunch of other things.
Right.
And then you do panic.
Yeah.
Because it's overwhelming. You do end up saying, well, so much of it is driven by mental health. What we need to do is take care of our mental health system. You see that often with school shootings. Mm-hmm. What you'll hear some folks say is, well, it was a mental health issue with a student who brought a gun to school. So we need to talk about mental health first.
Right.
It's like, well, maybe we do.
Right.
Maybe it isn't a public safety issue. We don't know, because we also have a broken mental health system. And so, so one of the things we struggle with, I think, in this country is being able to determine whether or not somebody is truly an unsafe person for our community.
Right.
Because there's so much noise around the policy conversations.
And then I think too, sorting that out through like systematic racism, anti-trans nonsense,
Right.
like, really kind of like sorting out that litmus test of what's safe and what's not safe. And I think like expanding those programs, like, of course I'm forgetting it now, but where people can be at home and they're still on supervision, or people can, like really taking a look at how we can kind of expand those things that keep people in their community, but and still allow them to be held accountable if that's what needs to happen. And as a former legislator, what actions did you take, or what actions do you think legislators now can take to start rethinking jail and bail?
Well, first, I would, if I were back in the legislature, and one of the things I did was I went and visited every prison in Oregon. I think it's really important for policymakers to go and see the systems that they are voting on, that they are funding, because legislators go and see their local schools. They go and visit their universities. They go and visit their local hospitals, but hardly any go and see their jails and prisons. And I think that it changes you as a legislator when you spend any amount of time looking at those systems, because it's something that very few, if any, policymakers experience in their personal lives. And I think that it is hard to talk about increasing the population of our jails or prisons if you've been there, and if you've spent time there, and if you've taken a tour not necessarily with the leadership of the Department of Corrections, but I would often go with the corrections officers union. So I would kind of come in the back door, or I would go with a volunteer who volunteered through a religious services or some other program. So I would take a different kind of tour.
Yeah.
And it really changes you as a legislator to spend some time in a correctional facility, seeing what was going on. So first and foremost, I think that needs to happen for legislators. And I think, beyond that, spending time with folks who are in reentry programs, who are systems, they're impacted by the systems in different ways with families, just trying to experience the various ways in which people are impacted by the system. Folks who are victims and survivors of crimes as well, and not relying on organizations that say that they speak for them in the legislature is really important too, because that is another place in which there are folks who claim that space in the legislature and say we are the voices of victims of crime. And that is not often the case. That is a very complicated space, and people who are victims and survivors of crime want lots and lots of different things. And it is not a monolith of a group of people, and they are almost always white. The advocates for victims.
I was just about to say that we've been hearing so much about that, so much about we always hear the worst of the worst of the worst story when it comes to criminal justice reform. And I'll just call a thing. It almost always involves a small white child or a small white girl or a white woman. And the reality is Black and brown people are being victimized at such a high rate that we really don't even have the comfort to come to the system and do that, or, being treated like criminals. We actually just had a young lady on our second episode of this that was a trafficking victim that was actually treated horribly, made to testify, then threatened, and then sanctioned anyway. So you're paying a fine for being a victim. And so it really is, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's so important that people really recognize that they don't speak for everybody at all. They speak for actually a very small fraction of people.
One of the most powerful places to go and talk to victims and survivors of crimes is Coffee Creek. If you go to the women's prison and you talk to women who are incarcerated at the women's prison, to a person who I have met there, those women are victims of crime.
Yes.
That is what started their journey.
Yes.
That landed them in Coffee Creek.
Yes.
And to understand that cycle is to better understand what the causes of criminal behavior and criminality, and how we are failing victims of crime and abuse and trauma in our communities. And it is such a powerful thing to recognize, I think, and what drives our system, and how we do not deal with trauma and abuse, and we just don't deal with crime victims in a way that helps anybody.
Right. Yeah, we're certainly not looking at the intersection between criminality and victimization. And I worked in the men's prison and at OSP doing the Pathfinders class, and the stuff that they were telling me about their lives, I'm telling you, I'm like, and nobody considered this. No one, no one thought to think hey, did you go through something? Are you good, bro?
Said, were you a child sexual assault?
What's your ACEs score?
Victim. Because if you ask that, if somebody came into the criminal justice system, it would be astonishing the number of adults in the adult system who were abused as children. I think that people would be shocked.
Yeah, and just not addressing that is just clearly not working. And so obviously this whole series is about talking about progressive DAs. How can we tell that someone is kind of in the same vein of thinking as us? How do we know? How can we tell the difference? And what short-term decisions can a DA make to reduce the harm of bail and jail? And how about longer term?
Well, I think first and foremost, if a DA is talking about any sort of services beyond jail and any sort of recognition of harm reduction beyond bail, then you know that they're probably somebody who, you know, is a little more progressive in their thinking. Because
I know the bar is so low.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
If they're like community safety, you could use bail, or you could think about just a risk assessment. You're like, oh, okay. Because it's just the recognition that money tells us nothing,
Right,
is a huge step. And the idea that they, you know, to not seek bail, or to understand that bail is a barrier,
right.
and that it only harms families, and, you know, that just that much would be great. And that jail is, you know, can disrupt people's lives so significantly that if somebody has children and they require them to stay in jail to the point where they lose their jobs, that's a problem. And a recognition of the interruption of someone's life because of bail or jail. The fact that that's a progressive thought is really, I mean, we're well beyond that.
Wild.
Yeah. So I think, you know, getting that step would be great. But, you know, the idea of looking at community resources as a way to divert folks out of that system, and divert them out of that system early. You know, just because somebody, you know, may end up arrested doesn't mean that they have to go through the jail or the bail system. You know, working with law enforcement to divert folks early before they even get to that point. So we're not talking about charging anyone, and we're not talking about whether or not they need a public defender, which we don't have enough of, or, you know, getting them into social service programs early and using our resources there instead of at a public defender or a jail, you know, into a jail system, is just such a much better use of our resources as a community, that keeps our community safer. Not using the resources at the next kind of criminal justice legal part of our system, but instead getting them into another part of our system that, you know, helps them become healthier and more whole, and uses our resources differently. That's how you make our community safer.
Well, and last week we kind of talked about addressing systematic racism in the criminal justice system. How does systematic racism appear in our jail and bail system? I know that's a loaded question. You're like, because it all is.
I would say, how does it not? Where is
like a shorter list?
Yeah, I was gonna say at the root, at, you know, literally all of it, because it's based on resources, and it's based on who has access to what. And it's a system by which we put people in cages. So it literally is the root of our system. And it's whether or not people have resources to get out of a cage. So the fact that we are now in a place where what was once a right for the landed gentry, you know, the land people who had access to land in a state where Black people couldn't live. So we wanted to guarantee the
that part
to get out of jail by the fact that they own land. And now we've so managed as a system to flip it on its head, where if you don't have access to resources, you stay in a cage. That is how systemic racism works. We have managed to flip an entire system on its head. to continue
Yes.
to be racist.
Yes.
That's pretty, I mean, it's pretty slick. It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. It's wild.
Uh-huh.
Oregon's good at that. So we talked about like, different alternatives to pretrial release. So we've talked about kind of like relying on risk assessments and things like that. And risk assessments have kind of also been criticized as
Mhm.
systematically racist.
Yeah.
Um, how do you think we can improve that? And, like in my mind, like I said, we take some ACEs scores. We talk about, where you're going. Do you have a place to go? Do you have family? Things like that. How do we kind of address that?
Well, I think we need to have the right people building those risk assessments, and we need to believe people when they say this part of that risk assessment is racist and this is why.
Right.
I'm thinking about the time I went to Billy Anville's program, Flip the Script, when I was a legislator. He invited me to come sit with the guys who were in that program, all African American men, either coming right out of prison or who have been out of prison for a little while, talking about their reentry process. And that day they were talking about housing and how hard it was to get housing, and that you have a place to live for 6 months after you get out of DOC, but then it was hard. You didn't, you basically were done with your DOC, transitional housing, and then what? And so many of them had ended up homeless. And part of it was the prohibition on living with the folks you had been living with at the time you committed your crime.
Right.
Well, so many of those folks had lived with their partner or their wife or the parent of their child or whatever. And so they couldn't get back, they couldn't go live there again. Right. So it kept them from living with their family because of their probation and parole terms. And what ended up happening is they were splitting up families because of the terms of their post-prison supervision, and they couldn't bond back with their children. And it was making them homeless, and it was keeping them away from their families.
Right.
And so there was no place for them to have that discussion about whether or not it was a good thing or not for them
Right.
to be prohibited from living back in that situation. And there was no flexibility. So what does that say about the risk assessment that says if they go back and live in the house where they were living when their crime was committed, that increased their risk? Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. As an automatic increase in their risk score, being homeless, having no place to live, and being cut off from their family maybe was a bigger risk.
Perhaps.
So checking in with whether or not that was an appropriate risk was probably a good idea.
Yeah. Do you have any examples from your own experience when bail did not serve the interests of public safety?
I mean, I think it's that disruption of families and disruption of community groups. And then I'm getting pinged for my other meeting.
All right, no worries, no worries. So
it's about to blow up, just so you know, Julianne.
I hear you. Well, I want to thank you so much
all day.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Next week, we're going to be working on step 5. I hope you join us. This has been Jen Williamson, and step 4, Rethinking Jail and Bail. And we hope you guys have an amazing day.
Thank you, Julianne.
You're so welcome. I'll talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye.